I'm just going to say, first I want to tell a story about Carol. Then I'll talk a little bit, and then I'm going to turn it over to Carol, and I think we're going to answer questions. Is that right? So this is meant to be a complimentary story. So, I'm saying that in advance, just in case. This is a funny story, but I think it's a good story. But you have to know New England to know that it's a good story. So I actually didn't know Carol Shea Porter, and I had encouraged a lot of people to run for office and do grassroots politics, and gotten in a lot of fights in Washington over that issue. But there were 6 representatives who got absolutely no help from the DCCC or anybody else at all in getting themselves elected, and one was Carol Shea Porter. And so but I knew a lot about her because, of course, all the grassroots folks that worked for her, many of them had worked for me, and Wes Clark also. And so I kind of liked her without ever having met her. And I get this call from Chris Van Hollen. Now, Chris Van Hollen is Rahm Emanuel's successor. And I don't know what it was like with you and Rahm, but it must have been a lot of fun. But Chris Van Hollen actually gets grassroots politics. But he called me up as a favor to me. He said, as a favor to, would I do a favor for him? And I said, well, what's that? Sure. And he said, would you talk to Carol Shea Porter? And I said, well, sure, I don't know her, but I'm certainly inclined to think she's done a terrific thing. She said, yes, but Carol has her own ideas about how to do things, and we're having a little trouble at the DCCC trying to figure out how to get her to take money from people that we think she should take money from, but she won't take money from. Do you think you could have her in? So I said, sure. So not knowing what to expect, I had her and a couple of key staff people in, and it turned out that she was tough as nails, smart as all hell, and I knew she was exactly the right person for her district, and I called Chris back and I said, you know, you should leave her alone and just do what she tells you to do, because she knows how to do it, she's going to win the election again. So anyway, that's my Carol Shea Porter story. Let me just say a couple of things about this election. First of all, I think what Kathy said is really true. This is going to be a very close election. It really is. This is a change election, a generational change. The last election was like this in terms of what was going on in the country is John F. Kennedy versus Richard Nixon, where Richard Nixon was the candidate of the past. John F. Kennedy, a Catholic when we'd never had a Catholic president, was running. That was an issue at the time, more so it turned out in the press than anything else. But the really important thing about that election is it was a generational election. And what we're seeing here is not just, you know, McCain is a disaster in the economy, which we're well aware of, as is Sununu, I might add, as is, what is that annoying opponent that you have? They all vote with Bush 90% of the time. You know, I think in New Hampshire it matters more whether you're willing to be independent than it does whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. And the Republicans in this city, first of all, in this town, first of all, in this state, excuse me, you can't trust Republicans with your money anymore. They're all borrow and spend, and that is the death knell in New Hampshire. None of these guys ought to be elected again, ever, for anything. I don't know why New Hampshire ever will vote for another Republican again. Look what they've done. The largest deficit in the history of the United States of America, $10 trillion. I can't even count the zeros in $10 trillion. I mean, this is ridiculous. So, you know, I think the Republican brand has been destroyed in New Hampshire. But it is going to be a close election. Because, as we say in medicine, when you send somebody to therapy or you're in therapy, you don't get anything done or you don't go to therapy unless the pain of staying the same exceeds substantially the fear of changing. And that's true, really. It's a human condition. It's not just about therapy. And so that's what the country is in the middle of right now. There has to be a big change. It is a generational change. Barack is the first new generation candidate. He's 47 years old, but he really speaks for the under 35s in this country. He thinks like them. He looks like them. He does. The under 35 generation is the first multicultural generation that sees themselves as America really is in the history of America. And so this is about change, and it's going to be a close election. It really is. And we need every last vote. So I just want to say how incredibly appreciative I am of the fact that you're all here writing checks to Carol, and she needs them, and she's going to put them to good use. And her opponent is not a nice person, and we have seen some of the things that they have said, including the lies they put on television all the time. That ought to disqualify all those guys right to begin with. But so she's going to need all that. But we also need your help getting out the vote. It really is important that every single person vote, and it's really important that you drag somebody to the polls. You know, my almost 80-year-old mother is up here knocking on doors. Now, she doesn't, of course, do anything I tell her to. So she went to Ohio 2 weeks ago with her friends, and now she's up here knocking on doors. And it was really funny. I just had dinner with her coming over, and before I came over here. And she said, well, I don't think we should be driving up these people's driveway. I said, Mom, this is New Hampshire. People expect that kind of thing here. Don't worry about it. But she's out there trying to get out the vote. And people, you know, this matters a lot. And if my mother's willing to come up here at age 80 from Eastern Long Island and drive herself with her friend and spend 4 days in New Hampshire, then it ought to be something worth something to the people from New Hampshire to do everything you can to get out every single vote.